Well, welcome again, everyone, to today's webinar. I'm going to repeat myself for some of you. Just want to take a brief moment. Like I said just now, today's webinar will be recorded. If you want to rewatch it or want somebody else to see it, it's going to be available on our website, probably pretty much right after this webinar. So again, welcome. You are in for a special treat today. This is a webinar that I certainly have been looking forward to for a long time, and I'm so glad we could make it happen. The two top leaders of the two top advertising industry trade associations are here with me today. And I'm proud to call each one of them my friend. And I'm enormously grateful to each of you for welcoming me so warmly into this rarefied space of industry trade groups dedicated to advertising and advancing it in all forms. I've been a part of it for a longer period of time since I've been with the IAB, but now in the leadership of the OAAA, you have both really been so supportive of me and giving me good advice and you know, making me part of the group. So I want to introduce each one of you. First of all, Bob Leodis, who of course is the CEO of the Association of National Advertisers, also known as the ANA. He's here to share current advertiser perspectives and also give us a sneak peek of his October Masters of Marketing conference that is about to kick off, which is one of the first really big events that are taking place in person in the industry this year. We're very excited about that. And then, of course, we have 4A's President and CEO, Marla Kaplowitz. Yep, hello. Marla will share the mindset and the mission of agencies right now. And she will also talk about something that's near and dear to her heart and mine and all of our hearts, namely DEI efforts and how they can help grow your business. She'll tell us what agencies are looking for from media sellers today and give her perspective on the marketplace in general. So I want to start the conversation and kick it off with top learnings from each one of you and what you've seen and experienced through the pandemic. And I'm going to ask you the same question, but with two different angles. The first one as a trade group CEO, and the second one as a human being, or why don't we flip it around, as a human first and a CEO second. I'll start with you, Marla, human first perspective.
Yeah, I think the pandemic taught us all that people are just incredibly resilient, but I also think it was a moment to really think about what we all had. And I know personally, I feel very lucky that I had my family, my health. I was able to work remotely, but not just working remotely. I was working remotely with an amazing team, and that every single person at the 4A's really stepped up and cared so much about our members and helping them get through a really challenging time. And it was just the commitment and support of each other that really helped us get through, especially those first incredibly challenging months.
Yeah, Marla, I think you used the right word of resilience. I think that the ability of the human spirit to shine through in what has now been an extended calamity that we've all faced. But I also want to acknowledge the incredible creativity of humans to adapt to this very, very challenging environment. And if we look to our industry, my goodness, we've all had to kind of spin on our heads and reinvent our business and brand models in order to be able to not only survive, but thrive. And I believe that that creativity has been a foundation for why the economy has been as reasonably strong as it has been over this particular period. So resilience and creativity would kind of be my hotspots.
Yeah, that's certainly true. And sometimes, you know, I'm thinking about it as we're coming back now, being excited for your event that's happening next week and all the conversations and all we learned for this year. Certain things, in certain ways, we're coming out of this pandemic stronger and better, and have really shifted to a new way of thinking and doing business, I think. So I want to talk a little bit more about creativity and collaboration, because that's, of course, very important for anyone in the ad business, for marketers, for agencies, for media companies, you name it. And, you know, I would argue especially for out-of-home companies. What are some of the best examples from your members of creativity through this crisis? Bob?
Yeah, sure. There are actually tons of great examples. And I think that our businesses have had to reinvent themselves, just as I was talking about a few moments ago, and I'll highlight three. One of the first was Anheuser-Busch, when in fact every bar across America shut down. They created the virtual bar, and they created these wonderful communities where people could enjoy themselves in the spirit of a bar, get your drinks out and celebrate with others, and the communities grew incredibly, and it was one of their highlights, particularly in the early part of the pandemic. Along with that was when you look at companies that essentially had to shut down their factories because they couldn't bring people together, essentially what they were able to do was to find ways to help out those in the pandemic. I looked to LVMH that produced masks and General Motors that produced ventilators. We don't use that anymore, but during the early days of pandemic, that was those were very, very contributory examples to help us out of the early stages of that. And then finally, Coca-Cola did a phenomenal video, essentially saying and talking to the human spirit, and it was about celebration for who we are, not to forget who we are. And they highlighted the fact that yes, we're all suffering and all doing weird things in order to be able to get by, but they said, let's step back and celebrate the human spirit. So those are a couple of examples.
Yeah, they're great examples. Marla, do you want to talk a little bit about examples from the agency side?
Yeah, I think that the agency sector, I mean, the brilliance of agencies is the recognition to just figure it out. And they really leveraged creativity in new ways. And there was pressure on the agencies for many years. How do you do production faster, cheaper, differently? And, it's the old quote of necessity is the mother of invention. And, everyone was forced to reimagine the way that people did things. There were constraints. You had agency people that just packed up equipment from the office and they were just creating content on the fly. My favorite ad, though, that I think of from that time was just the Snuggle ad that was done by TBWA Shite Day. And it was the creative director who just said, I'm going to just film this in our family's laundry room with his wife on her laptop showing people working remotely, the kid cutting his own hair and just the chaos. To me, it was like this organized chaos. I love the term K-org because that's how we all felt. Like we were just all juggling and managing and, the nice top, so the nice blouse up top and the sweatpants on the bottom and just the sheer messiness of it all. But now, were we all in it together? That was a very commonly used line. I don't know about that, but I think that it proved that you can do things differently. And so the other change is that you can't go back. Once you learn how to be more nimble and agile and also really move quickly, you've got to be able to adapt and move that forward. And so there was so much learning and principles that are now carried forward in the way that content is developed and production is delivered.
It's quite amazing. I think back to a New Front presentation many years ago, probably 2-3 years before the pandemic. I remember Digitas had a New Front, and they were talking about how advertising has lost its costs and nothing is interesting anymore, and it's just fluffy dogs, and how do we move on from here and how do we make things better? And I think we certainly got a reset where we were forced to and share being actually authentic and share of ourselves in a way that we can't go back from. But it's been very interesting. I'm super inspired by a lot of what we've seen. So you are two very famous collaborators over the year. Your organizations have always been worked together and worked very closely. And as one who also partners with each one of you separately and together, how important are strategic partnerships in business today, and how has that changed over the last year?
Yeah, strategic partnerships are just so critical. You don't get things done, you go it alone, or you can go much farther when you go with a partner. There was some research from Deloitte a few years ago that really looked at companies that were front runners, and they typically were always leveraging partnerships that were creating real advantage. And as an association leader, I have to partner with other people. We need coalitions. We need to work with others to really drive scale and impact. And I am so fortunate to partner with each of you in various ways, because our mission is not just to add value to our members, but it's to move our industry forward. And we can't do that on our own. The agency sector does not exist in isolation. It's very much a broader ecosystem that we need to be part of, and partnerships are core to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just pivot on that. there's no other way that we can successfully do business, Anna. It's either you link up with your friends and collaborators, or essentially you're going to become irrelevant. And I know for both Marla's organization and ours, and I'm sure yours, Anna, if you do not connect with others in your industry, you're just not going to be able to move the mountain. You know, as a trade association head, what we look to do is to ensure that we're relevant and valuable to our respective constituents, but importantly to the industry, because we have a view that is looked upon to basically bring the industry together for whatever the reasons are, to create standards or to improve and build upon an opportunity or to resolve a specific issue. When you look across the past couple of years, the amount of collaborations that have come forward, like GARM, the Global Alliance for Responsible Media, to focus in on brand safety, like PRAN, the Partnership for Responsible and Addressable Media, which is zeroing in on privacy and addressable forms of digital advertising. Marla and I, we collaborate in managing Ad ID, which is essentially a significant coding system that attaches to advertising assets. And I'm not sure it's well known or understood, but the 4A's and the ANA have formed the Joint Policy Committee, which has been in existence for years and years, and we negotiate the Screen Actors Guild contract for commercial talent every 3 years. We have a negotiation coming up in early 22. And those are just a handful of the examples of the types of partnerships that we have. I'm sure many just to kind of escape the public view, but that's essentially the bedrock for how we help to manage the industry.
Yeah, well, I very much agree with that. And, you know, I worked closely with you when I was at the IB. And I think for the out-of-home industry now, especially as we're going through a lot of changes, we're becoming more digital, we're moving towards automation. We're, you know, really making an effort to become more front and center of the overall sort of media mix, being included, not seen as a standalone. We are a little different. And we want to celebrate that, but it's important for us to work with the buy side to really figure out how we do things better, work on those standards and rules and definitions and guidelines that can help move the industry forward. So we want to be, of course, very, very engaged with both of you and other associations and you know, helping bring the industry forward, because to your point, you know, it's not about, we're all in it together, right? So it's very important. With that, I want to hear, you know, again, my members and I, of course, being on the sell side, are very interested in both what the agencies and what the brands think of out of home and what the companies are saying right now. So I really want to kind of hear what you're hearing from our members. So I want to start with a completely non-scientific poll, but asking you to just generalize a little bit of the current feeling in the marketplace. So Marla, I'll start with you. Can you pick one and explain why? Are your members right now tired, pessimistic, have their plans on hold, or are they cautiously optimistic and sort of dipping their toes back in the water, or are they very confident, planning media buys and backing or nearly back to pre-pandemic levels? Where do you think they stand?
Oh, the latter, number 3, very confident, very bullish. I think the 1, 2, 3, you could almost go back to the beginning of the pandemic, and we've evolved from being tired and pessimistic and, quite frankly, rather worried about the duration of what was going to go on in terms of the negative business impact to things are thriving, things are very positive. The biggest issue we have right now, and we can talk about it, is just getting the talent to be able to deliver on all the work that is existing right now and being able to really get through it all. I think on a positive note, what we have learned is that this has been a new way to deliver on productivity, but we also have to manage the burnout piece of it. So very bullish and positive and optimistic about what's happening, and that's good for everybody in business.
Yeah. How
that was me knocking on wood, by the way.
Well, I do think that there is cause for optimism, despite the uprise of the Delta variant. We're in a situation that is an uncertain point in time. And from the marketer side of the equation, it's a little bit different, because it all depends upon what industry you're in. If you're in the travel and entertainment or hotel industry, you're still not feeling very good, because while consumers are essentially returning to some degree of travel. Business travel has certainly been suffering. And so there's probably a degree of pessimism that exists there, even with the hope that, we're going to finally get past this thing at some point in time. But I do think that there are quite a few industries that are certainly looking up. And, the consumer goods have been strong from day one. So I think, companies like Clorox and Procter & Gamble have certainly had a continuous stream of opportunity that they have been able to build upon. But as we go forward, we're still going to be dancing a little bit to really figure out how to be able to acknowledge what has been this unusual environment as people are getting to be in different places. One of the core themes that has come out of the pandemic that brands are embracing is this concept of brands for humans. We always talked about B2B or B2C, but we're now focusing in on B for H, brands for humans. And the core concept around this is a recognition that brands have this opportunity to create a tighter relationship with their consumer and customer bases, for that matter. And that's an opportunity that is continued to be advantageous, because marketers are finding that they in fact find this as a competitive advantage, when in fact that they can create that strong bond when you're authentic and ensure that you create that meaningful linkage with your consumer. It becomes a strategy that not only can carry you past today, but can carry you over the long term.
Yeah, very true. And I would argue that out of home, to sort of segue into that a little bit, is the perfect medium to build those relationships with consumers, just because they have a very favorable, in general, perception of the platform and engage really well with the ads. So specific to out of home, could you both categorize a little bit what you're hearing from your members right now, current concerns and views? When it comes specifically to out of home, Bob, what are the top two things that marketers are saying right now, or three if you have it?
Well, I have been a fan of out of home for a long time, and first of all, I'm thrilled at out of home's digitization. I think that the quality of out of home is just off the charts fabulous. We have evolved this industry so far, and I think it has become, and should become, if it's not part of a marketer's mix, it really needs to become. And the reason why is that it is flexible. It is, I would say, essentially a non-intrusive medium. It's just there. It's everywhere. And being everywhere, you essentially bump into it. You see it, you acknowledge it, but it's not intrusive. And I think in that way, kind of just being part of everyday life, consumers can experience it without feel like, oh, there's another ad coming, or there's another ad I have to deal with, either on the mobile platform or in television or video, and in that regard. And I think that there is a greater degree of receptivity by consumers, particularly since they can be entertaining, and they, just walk through Times Square at night, and it's a great example. It just kind of lifts you up, which is kind of different from a lot of experiences that some consumers have with advertising. So I think that there are a lot of advantages for online advertising, and if marketers haven't considered it for a while, it should be really there. And I'll just make one final note. It's an important part of an integrated platform. We've talked about integrated marketing for years. And I do think it's foundational as a critical brand strategy to have an integrated marketing campaign, and out of home should be definitely part of that.
No, I could not agree more, Bob.
I'm sure.
Glad you said it, and I'm glad we're recording. But it is very true, and I think even more so now coming out of the pandemic, right? When people, most consumers really appreciate being outdoors and seeing messages in that form and being in those locations that maybe they weren't before. It's a sign of normalcy. So I think if it was true before, it's even more true now, and definitely should be part of every media plan. Marla, what are agencies thinking about that?
Yeah, so I would say at a high level, you've got agencies trying to really sort out how to incorporate data between kind of the digital side or mobile into out of home, and trying to understand distinctions between likelihood to see and opportunity to see. And it's been great partnering with you, Anna, on trying to really get to greater clarity on this. It's so important. I think one of the challenges that your members probably experience is that there's still somewhat of a siloing on the agency side from an operational standpoint in terms of who's really overseeing kind of the out of home buys and how you manage that. Also, depending upon the type of the agency. So I think the more that we can stop siloing analog and digital and really just look at it as an integrated medium, it will be much better for everyone. I think there's probably still more work that needs to be done there. And part of that is on the agency side too, from a structural standpoint. I think the other piece, and I kind of already kind of hinted at this, is the measurement piece. How do we make sure that agencies, all types of agencies, really understand the benefits of not just digital out of home, where maybe you have potentially better metrics, but also traditional forms of out of home, and also as the ecosystem just continues to evolve. It's so important to really be able to measure that. And out of home is competing with a lot of other channels where you actually have the ability to connect it back. Maybe you can attribute it better. So the better we can get with measurement, I think it's just going to help grow those opportunities, as well as Bob mentioned, just the digitization is so fantastic and critical too.
Yeah, no, that is true. And again, we talked before about trade association collaboration. And I think these are areas where it's really important that we continue the work. And I've certainly had very good collaboration with your team, well, with your team too, Bob, but Marla in particular, I think with your team now starting to rethink the ecosystem. And we are making great strides in measurement. And I think we will do even more so in the coming year as the out-of-home industry is embarking on an innovation path. But there's some work to be done, but you can measure more than you think. So I think the biggest challenge for the OAAA to actually inform your members of how greatly
yes.
it can be done and how it works. I want to take one step back again to performance or purpose-driven marketing, I should say, because I think that yes, we've gone through this year and a half now of turmoil and lots of emotions and difficult time, and you talked about it before, Bob. Brands for a call.
Brands for humans, yeah.
Exactly, brands for humans. But at the same time, and I think before we entered into the pandemic, there was a great shift towards more performance-driven marketing, definitely over purpose-driven. Are your members starting to get more focus on that, sort of as back to business goals or back to business is happening and things are starting to be more normal? Is there a balance between the two, performance versus or over purpose-driven?
Focus? It's a great question, and one always gets into the short-term versus long-term kind of conversation about what becomes more important. I think going into the pandemic, we were becoming far more immersed into performance marketing. Especially with the richness of data and analytics that seemed to be exploding pre-pandemic. And as I was alluding to before, is that the pandemic really enhanced the focus in on the human condition. Think about what we went through. We had people who were health challenged, whether they just got sick or they lost members of their family or their friends. Their jobs were in jeopardy. Recall at the very beginning of the pandemic, unemployment rose, the market became uncertain. There was a lot of fear, consumer fear in the marketplace. And that's why Brands for Humans kind of evolved as a philosophy, is the acknowledgement that the human condition was being very much challenged. And in that regard, brands found a great opportunity to kind of connect with that human condition. And essentially, they stopped selling. It was not about selling. It was about being the best friend that you could possibly be, and to help each other. It was a remarkable time to recognize that this isn't you versus me, or you winning and me losing. This is about all of us kind of surviving. And the lessons learned that came out of that, I think, continue, because what this has allowed marketers to be able to do is to create that deep and penetrating relationship with consumers such that it became more meaningful, and consumers were appreciating the authenticity of that relationship and started to shift their purchase patterns to those that demonstrated that level of authenticity, and which shifted it more to a long-term phenomena. So it's not that marketers are running away from performance marketing, not in the least, but I think that there is a far greater appreciation for brand marketing, with a big focus on the consumer condition.
Yeah. What's your perspective on that, Marla?
I would just say it's still so client driven based on what the marketer's needs are. And it really did start to shift last year. There's such a hyper focus right now on e-commerce, and that is obviously so performance driven. We have so much data at our disposal that you can get sales information in such micro time segments, but you can also become paralyzed by just constantly focusing on that as well. But the pressure is still on to deliver both. So it's really finding, it's not either or, it's how do you deliver both? And I'll quote Mark Pritchard here, it's growth for good. So if it's about growth and good, those two things really have to go together with performance and brand and business and what you're trying to deliver. So I think that will continue to be just the ongoing focus. It's just about both. How do you make sure? And maybe the scale is going to tip more to one side or the other, depending upon your effort, but you're going to need to make sure that it delivers.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's true. And it's interesting how things have shifted. Speaking of being driven by purpose, though, and I want to make sure I get this in the middle of our conversation, because it's so important, and I don't want to save it for the end. It's certainly something that we're thinking a lot about here at the OAAA, and you know, I really want to bring up the topic of diversity, because I know you're both so passionate about it, and it plays into all the things of how you can be purpose driven, how you can, you know, get talent that's the right, and how you can just become more successful. Diversity really is a business imperative for all companies, but it's not easy. You both have very robust diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, and you've had so for many, many years. We just started ours, so I'd love to hear from you. You know, how you're thinking about it, and specifically for you, Marla, how you see that diversity, equity, and inclusion can help agencies grow their businesses, and you know, why it's so important. And then also a little bit about how 4A's has advanced the more diverse industry, you know, what you have done, and you know,
Sure.
for us to be inspired by.
Yeah. I always say that agencies are about three things: people, product, and clients. And you have to start with people. You just absolutely have to. And so to me, a vibrant, thriving industry that is responsible for creativity and helping to shape and mirror culture, you have to reflect society and the people that are ultimately the consumers. And so we need to ensure diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. To really engage employees, you have to have an experience that resonates. That's the way you're going to help drive greater retention within your organization. But we have, in many ways, been very narrow in the way that we're looking at DE&I. We've been hyper focused on the numbers and what the composition is of the talent. DE&I needs to be an overall business approach and a framework for how you go to market. It's across everything that needs to get done. And so that's reimagining everything from not just who's developing the content and how it's created, behind, whether you're doing video, who's behind the camera, in front of the camera, how plans are developed, the research, the methodology, the way everything is deployed. You really need to be thinking much more holistically. And so within the 4A's, as well as our 4A's Foundation, we are very focused and committed to developing programs, not just for agencies, but also for the broader industry, that want to take advantage of it, and to constantly identify new ways. So we're now in, I'm so proud, our 48th year of our MAPE program. So MAPE is the Multicultural Advertising Intern Program, and that's responsible for identifying stellar talent of color in colleges and helping them get exposure through training and learning and an internship. And we now have about 4,000 alumni in the MAPE alumni group. And then last year, the foundation was recognizing an opportunity to help better support mid to senior level Black talent. So we launched a program called Vanguard, and that's really to drive change at the leadership level within organizations. It actually provides sponsorship, mentorship, coaching, not just for the fellow, but for the CEO who's acting as sponsor, for the mentors, and really to help try and change the focus of the organization and to create more diverse and inclusive leadership. We're about to launch a new partnership with VMLY&R for people to get access to Black talent called Dear Black Talent. And then I'm also really excited because last year we brought together the agency community for an Equity and Inclusion Congress over 4 days and created an industry manifesto. And we all recognize this is not a problem that is fairly new. It's been built over decades and centuries, and therefore it's going to take time. So we built a plan over 2, 5, and 10 years, laying out what independent agencies need to focus in on, holding companies, as well as the industry. And we're going to get that group back together on October 25th and 26th. Take a look at what is the progress that's been made. I always say you cannot be precious about DE&I. Don't be proprietary. Share what's working, share what's not working. Let's focus on this together. And we've been partnering as an industry. We need to continue to do that. These key areas are recruiting, retention, learning and development, reporting and measurement, and then how do you build a sustaining team? I think that's really critical. So we will continue to focus on opportunities. We just launched our campaign enlightenment program, which is trying to help people understand bias that's built into campaign development and the journey and how to remove that by working together as teams. So I could go on and on with the programs, but there's no shortage of need, but there is a real appetite for change. I just want to make sure that what happened last year is not a moment in time, but is a movement and that will endure.
Yeah, so true. It's so impressive. I mean, very well thought through. There's a lot of good there. Marla, I hope we can partner on some of those things because it is
great.
Important. And it's you know, it takes time and you need to really think it through to do it right. And again, collaborate with more than, you know, your own industry. So well, very impressive. And, you know, again, it is not just about talent. You just mentioned it. It's not just about talent. It's not just about retention. It's also about how just changing a perception in general, and marketing is great for that. So at the ANA, you have a wide collection of diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, but one of them that is actually my personal favorite I can see that I've been somewhat involved in is See Her. And, you know, as a mom of 2 young women, I'm especially tuned in to See Her's mission of how women are being portrayed, women and girls in marketing, advertising, and the media environment. And I think it's important that shift, and that's going to help with the overall mission, right? So that's a great concept. Tell us a little bit more about that, Bob.
Sure. It's thank you for raising that. First of all, I wanted to congratulate Marla on what she's doing across the board. I think the agency community has always been a role model for us all in terms of how to be able to really treat our own talent and to be able to behave differently, which has been foundational to what we need to do. And that's a little bit of the philosophy behind See Her. See Her is essentially focused, as you indicated, at essentially the accurate portrayal of women and girls in ads. And why is that so fundamentally important? And it goes back to Marla's earlier comment about Mark Pritchard saying we need to be a force for good and a force for growth. Well, part of the problem within our industry that we honestly did not recognize is that we carry with us bias. It's an unconscious bias. And that unconscious bias drifts into the creative process for ads. We don't understand it. We don't always recognize it. But within See Her, we made it our mission to ensure that we could accurately portray women and young girls in ads and to remove the unconscious bias. And we do it through a measure that was created a few years ago called GEM, the Gender Equality Measure. And what it allows a creative to do is to be able to look at their ad and then through very, very simple research methodologies is to understand how that ad compares against other ads. And you essentially walk out with an index. And if you fall below 100, then essentially that you move into the territory of having a level of unconscious bias in those ads. Now, one could argue, well, do I really need to do anything? Well, if you're a brand marketer, you should, because we know that when ads score underneath 100, you essentially underperform in terms of the quality and impact of your advertising. Those ads that score above 100 actually have an empirical linkage to far better performance. And that's why we are encouraging very strong and broad utilization of the GEM methodology in order to be able to do that. And that process has drifted into our other major area called AIM, the Alliance for Inclusive and Multicultural Marketing, which its primary mission is to have the accurate portrayal of culture in ads. And to where Marla was going so heavily is that our population, the demography of the US, is essentially 40% multicultural, and we have to recognize that ethnic diversity is paramount and in the appropriate inclusiveness in our advertising to ensure the accurate portrayal of cultures in ads is critical. We've created another metric called CIM, C-I-I-M, which is a cultural measurement index approach, which is a little bit more sophisticated than GEM, but essentially achieves the same thing, as to be able to understand how you need to adjust your copy in order to essentially perform better and to remove as much unconscious bias in ads.
That is great. And I think that all these initiatives and all these advancements is going to help bring us forward, hopefully a lot faster. And to your point too, Marla, not make what happened last year an isolated blip. Again, it's so inspiring to hear from you on these things. And I hope that all of the folks on this call take it to heart and really start using these measures and think about their campaigns and how they're building their teams, et cetera, because it's, again, that's where growth is going to come from. And that's how we're all going to be successful. And 40% is a large number. That's 40% of the consumers, right? So we have to get it right. So I'm going to shift focus again, even though I think that conversation is probably one of the most important ones we've had here today. Back to the business of trade associations. It's in all of our, I would argue, job descriptions that we need to be coalition builders, we need to be industry influencers, and people who convene our members to make meaningful advances in the ad world and also have a little bit of fun and do business. And one thing that has been the tool for that and always enabled that to happen was the work, that we do, and especially the two of you, much more than the AAA, we do it too, but that we do through our events and our events businesses. And of course, that's also where a lot of our funding comes from. Marla, how did you pivot? I mean, you did a lot of events. How did you pivot in the stay-at-home, orders of the pandemic with your events, and how are you approaching the next 6 months? This is a tricky one as we're planning for next year, I know, but how are you going about that?
Fortunately, not as many events as the ANA, but I would say, you talked about coalition and connecting people. One of the hallmarks of the 4A's community, but that's the same for any trade association. And so I think we had to redefine, how do you bring people together in new ways? And so we had quickly pivoted to think about, how do we amplify our content? How do we bring people together to get the information and the connection they needed? We fortunately, all had to shift our events to virtual experiences. And while I'd like to get people back together physically, we were fortunate that we didn't have any contracts that committed us to having to do that. So we've been able to be flexible. We just had our strategy festival, which we've been doing every year, that really focuses in on the account planning community. And we have our Jay Shyatt Awards with that. Last year, we held it virtually. So we actually have a year-over-year comparison. We actually got over 200 more people this year. We had about 750 people, which was amazing. So our community, when it is the right niche topic and content, will come together. But I also recognize people are getting burned out, and we need to find a way to get them back together again. So at this point, we are still virtual through early Q1, just because there's just too much unpredictability in what is going on. And We just want to make sure that we focus in on safety and community, but we also are getting a lot of feedback from our members who are outside the larger markets, who really appreciate the virtual aspect because they can send more people and they're not having to put money into travel costs. So we all know we're going to end up in some sort of hybrid experience moving forward, which is also going to be an adjustment for everyone.
Yeah, no, definitely. There's so many benefits of being able to bring, we had the same thing with our convention, more people than we ever had, but there is, you know, something special about getting together in person. And shifting over to you, Bob, I promise a sneak peek of your Masters of Marketing conference, which is of course going to be live in Orlando, starting, I think, October 5. I'm going to be there. We just talked about it. You're going to have a lot of speakers there live, maybe not the largest audience ever, but it is happening. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. Unlike Marla, we did have a lot of contracts. You know, one never expected a pandemic to happen, and it certainly was disrupting a model. And you know, I applaud what Marla and a lot of trade associations have done to shift to virtual across everything, whether it's small meetings or large conferences or something in between. We went back to, as Marla indicated, a hybrid model back in June with our national conferences. And I have to tell you that the ability to bring people together, as you were alluding to, Anna, is an incredible experience. It's almost like a little bit about being reborn when you see friends and colleagues and you can actually go up to them and you know, either hug them or shake hands or just at least acknowledge that they're there. It was emotional experience, to be perfectly honest with you. And we've had the good fortune and challenge at the same time to have done 7 of these hybrid conferences so far since June. And it's been quite a challenge, to say the least, to be able to do that. But the Masters is kind of our signature conference, as you indicated. And we do have we're really pleased with the lineup that we have this year. But what is really important for us is that we're now going to have some critical mass in terms of actually in-person attendance. It's not what we'll call historic attendance, but we'll probably have about 500 in person when all is said and done. And we had hoped for more, but we recognize that 500 is a healthy crowd nonetheless. And we're looking for a very, very similar type of experience. And we, of course, have a virtual audience as well. And I agree with Marla. I think hybrids are going to be the way to go. And the beauty of it is that it allows for, as Marla indicated, many individuals that didn't have the opportunity to experience conferences before because of travel and costs associated with that, to now experience what these things are about. And yeah, so that's a pretty good thing. But you asked about, you know, the speakers. I'll just read off a couple of great names. Obviously, Mark Pritchard from P&G, S.C. Bracey from Unilever, Marissa Talbot from Lowe's, Raja Shamanar from MasterCard, Rachel Ferdinando from PepsiCo, Greg Revelle from Kohl's, Morgan Flatley from McDonald's, Tim Ellis from NFL, and a bunch more. And these are the elite within the industry. The Masters is all about growth. That's always the common theme. It's the one conference that focuses on business results and how success is achieved or how failure was avoided, or you know, how we all learn from each other. And we always try to get a very diverse speaking platform to ensure that we examine how businesses are built from many different angles through many different industries. And that theme has existed for more than a decade, and we'll obviously continue with it because that's what we're in business to do, is to basically build brands and to build businesses. So we're looking forward to it. Yep, it's about a week and a half away, and I'm glad you and your team are going to be with us.
Yeah, I'm certainly looking forward to it. It's one of, if not my favorite event every year. So I am very glad it's back in person, and the program looks amazing. So I think it's going to be fantastic. But I also recognize, like the conversation we're having here today, for example, would have been a lot harder to schedule, and it would be harder to get you in front of a lot of my members out in the country. So I'm glad we can do both. But for you know, the people actually on this webinar, if you're an out-of-home seller in a half virtual, half live world, what's your best advice to them for connecting with your buyers and advertisers, and you know, advertisers and agencies? How should they think about it? Because conferences is definitely a place that used to be the
yeah
for that, right?
It's a great question. you know, the way marketers learn is through case histories. And it's very important that your sellers understand how to be able to demonstrate how a brand benefits by the deployment of out of home. And that may seem obvious, but the uniqueness of what it is that you can bring to the table enhances the marketing mix. And as we talked before about creating an integrated marketing platform for marketers, the ability to weave those stories. I mean, we're all into the business of storytelling. And I think that the storytelling component, especially with the tremendous advancements in out-of-home technology, and even though measurement is challenged, I think it's certainly improved over the course of time, to be able to have that intersection of the uniqueness of the out-of-home arena, the ability to measure those particular gains, the confluence of everything that a marketer needs within an integrated marketing platform are the elements that I think will enhance the conversation with the brands to ensure that out of home is center plate. I think it's so materially different from experiences before, and I truly do think it's a value added for a lot of the reasons which I spoke about earlier, including its non-intrusiveness, its flexibility, its capability, and those are all great highlights. And the more you can bring that integrated marketing message, I think the more successful sellers will be.
Hear, hear. Marla, what do you say?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I kind of mentioned it earlier, the more you can talk about how to look at the synergy with traditional, digital, how to integrate that, getting people to understand how to think about measurement, how they can go and sell that into a client, and also focusing in on the creative opportunities. I do think sometimes it is forgotten because it is not viewed as easy or as desirable, because you won't be able to show the immediate return or the impact on that. So whatever you can do to understand those barriers and really partner with the agencies to push that forward, and know that every agency is kind of approaching this a little bit differently. It does help to do some sort of, day or afternoon where you could bring in a lot of different people to just do broader education on this. It really does help get them to see, because you're constantly innovating in this space. And I don't know that people are always aware of all the new opportunities that are out there, both creatively as well as just even the different formats and access in terms of the shift with digitization too.
Yeah, no, I agree. And we're certainly planning on doing, that's going to be a big part of our next year is going both to advertisers and agencies and tell that story. And, I think a big one there is also just the connection between out of home and social media. There's some really great examples lately of how if you do really great creative and good locations, you could get a lot of free media on social just through those campaigns. So no, that's very good points, and points that we've definitely taken to heart. We are at time now, but so I want to kind of close out and just ask the two of you, we covered a lot of ground here today. We talked about the pandemic, about events, about creativity, about collaboration, about standards, and of course, about diversity and inclusion. If one of you can share just like the top headline out of this very diverse conversation, what would that be, Marla?
All right. Out of home continues to evolve and transform, creating exciting possibilities to connect with consumers.
You should be in advertising. That was how about you, Bob?
Yeah, I'll keep it simple. Invest to win. It's really about that. This is a great time for brands and agencies and sellers to kind of all get together. It is a time to differentiate. It's an opportunity to ensure that your distinguished and differentiated brands have the opportunity to make an impact, but you got to get out there and you got to invest to win.
Thank you, Bob. Those were both two really fantastic headlines. I am so grateful that we've had you both here. It was even better than I thought it would be. I'm excited. I think that these insights, I hope they should keep, our audience, the ones who tuned in and the ones who will watch it later, really in tune with what their brand and agency partners are thinking right now. So again, huge thank you to both of you for coming here, and also to show us how important it is that we as trade associations collaborate. I look forward to working working with you in the coming year and your event, Bob. And, Marla, I hope I see you soon again.
Me too.
So both of you have a wonderful weekend. Everyone on the webinar, have a wonderful weekend. And like I said in the beginning, the broadcast will be available in our webinar library after this webinar. So check it out again if you want to. Lots of good stuff here. Everyone have a great day. Thanks so much. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.